Languaging and Language Introduction. So, in the coming modules, we will be talking about how languaging practices that happen in the socio-cultural context in which you live, how are they related to this construct of language itself, or what we call or choose to call a language. So, languaging would mean, of course, that people use different languages for expressing themselves, interacting with others, and for referring to certain concepts or certain constructs. Languaging practices that we talked about just now are actually codified or represented in a language. So how we talk about it is languaging, and how they are represented in a certain code system, the spelling, the pronunciation, the language structure, that would be a language. So language leads to certain languaging practices, but it's the languaging practices itself that give significance to a language. Now remember that language is not just something to express yourself in or for some basic interaction. It is also a symbolic system. That means it represents something other than what it is. That is, a certain code of language might represent a certain meaning for certain communities. For instance, if we look at Urdu, Urdu is a language, but it also means for you a specific Pakistani identity. More often than not, this Pakistani identity is also merged with this Muslim identity because it has lots of Arabic and Persian words in it. And similarly, if you think about the symbolic value of the languages or as a symbolic code, think about Hebrew. Think of how the Jewish community actually revitalized Hebrew, which was related to their scripture. Think about Arabic, think about Quran, think about Sanskrit and Hindu holy books, and Latin also similarly are all related to certain sacredness. Then there are certain ceremonial languages which are very important to the native speakers, and they feel that this language actually allows them to connect their bodies and spirits to a being that is higher to themselves. So the translation of a language might lose the essence of that language, essence of that kind of connection. And it is the language itself that is very important. And that is why you are encouraged to read Quran in that kind of classical Arabic, which is not actually used in real life. So what we mean to say is that when certain languages are imposed and other languages are discouraged, and sometimes languages die, they have real consequences for the communities who feel or undergo a sense of loss of identity. Now, language as a symbolic system, if we may say, are of different kinds. There can be oral languages, languages which are not actually written down, but somehow passed on from generation to generation. Interestingly, there are also sign languages which also are sort of different from each other. So the way a sign language is used in Pakistan might be very different with way a sign language or the symbolic system of the sign language means in Spain or in France or in England. So even people talk about sign language, and they talk about bilingualism in sign language. So it doesn't mean that if what you see on the television in Pakistan, a certain symbol, a certain sign meaning something, this connection between sign and meaning is not absolute. So you need to bring in bilingualism over there also to enable the people who are impaired in speech and hearing to sort of connect with other communities. So this sign language had its own, remember, phonological, morphological, and semantic rules, like its own meaning system, its own vocabulary. So we will try to find out or talk about, is language a static code? Is it a given system, or is it sort of prone to change? What are dialects and how are they different from pidgins and Kirols? And what about the politics involved in all this? And how are specifically Kirol speakers different from others in terms of their languaging?